please go ahead and put your name and your affiliation in the chat. Love to see you here. Again, thank you so very much for being here today. Well, I just want to say, just to introduce myself, and I know I see some familiar names. I'm Patty Robinson, Faculty Director of Civic and Community Engagement at College of the Canyons. And I am joined by my colleagues, Rebecca Moonstone from 3CSN and Jan Connell from Cerritos College, and also representing 3CSN for the last of our Civic Dialogue series for this spring. Kimberly Rosenfeld, who also typically joins us, is not here today, but again, wishes everyone well. So as I typically do before we get started, I know we've got some new folks here. I give you a little bit of the history about Civic Dialogues. And just to let you know that, as I said, this is our last presentation for spring, but don't worry, we're going to have a great lineup for fall, which will be starting not that far away. Our history of the series began in fall 2020 and really was the result of COVID. While Jan and I and Kimberly were working on a project for bringing theory to practice, we had hoped to have a live training event, but because of COVID, we had to switch to a different kind of format. And so we decided to have a speaker series, which we really thought would last maybe one semester, but now we're going into our 4th semester. So it's turned out to be a very successful ongoing event, and we're very happy that 3CSN is also part of this venture. The reason that we wanted to do this series is that we are very committed to the concepts of civic learning and democratic engagement. And this is a concept that not really is well known among community colleges. But at the same time, there are some of the most prestigious and well-recognized leaders in civic engagement in the country that have been participating in our dialogues. And we see this as a way of introducing you to some of the concepts, to some of the ideas, and certainly to some of the practitioners and researchers and scholars in the field. Today's presentation is set up in 2 parts. We have our guest speaker, and then after Dr. Galizio is finished presenting, Jan and I will move folks into a deeper dive where we'll talk about some of the things that came out of today's presentation. We have 3 guiding frameworks to advance understanding of the intersection between equity, agency, and civic engagement to promote the public good. Also to recognize civic, community, and democratic engagement as a high impact practice and also connected to guided pathways, and also to leverage participants' current knowledge, meaning you, to build capacity to innovate for local and global change. And with that, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for today, Dr. Larry Galizio. Dr. Galizio has served as the president and CEO of the Community College League of California since 2015. Dr. Galizio earned his undergraduate degree from UC Berkeley, a master's degree from San Francisco State, and his doctorate from the School of Urban and Public Affairs at Portland State University. Prior to becoming League CEO, Dr. Galizio served 5 years as president of Clatsop Community College in Astoria, Oregon. Before that, he was the director of strategic planning in the chancellor's office for the Oregon University system, as well as director of speech and debate and full-time faculty member at Portland Community College for 16 years. Dr. Galizio is co-author of the textbook Elements of Parliamentary Debate, A Guide to Public Argument, and of the first comprehensive and contemporary history of California community colleges, A College for All Californians, a history of the California community colleges. In 2004, Dr. Galizio was elected to the Oregon Legislature Assembly, where he served 3 terms, including stints as chair of the Ways and Means Education Committee, responsible for all of the public education budgets in the state. With that, it is our great honor to introduce Dr. Larry Galizio.
Well, thank you, Patty, and Jan and Rebecca, and everyone. The nice small group we have gathered here. This is like a graduate seminar, which is what I like. And to the extent there's a desire to do this, I hope we can have more of a conversation. I'm not here to give a speech with a capital S by any shape or means. I think civic engagement is about dialogue. So I do not have a PowerPoint, so I know that might disappoint some of you, but it does not disappoint me because again, I think we can perhaps broach some topics. And so a couple of things I wanted to start off with is, one, just talk a little bit about the California Community College League, because you're not necessarily familiar with it just because you're involved, if you are involved with California community colleges. So I'm talk a little bit about the league and what we try to do, and then a little bit about my perspective on community colleges and civic learning and democratic engagement. And just from the bio, I hope you see something of a thread there, that I've been in positions in kind of public service, and I think education at community college is a type of public service that's really important. And the bulk of what I'd like to do is share with you a piece I wrote that makes the argument that community colleges, whether they be in California or New York or Texas, are really essential sites of viewpoint diversity and constructive engagement, and that we need to do a better job of facilitating civic engagement and participatory governance and civic participation. I worry about the vocationalization of community colleges. Certainly, getting people jobs or educating individuals, our students, to increase their career prospects and getting jobs is an important and significant and useful part of the mission of community colleges, and I suspect they will be for quite some time. However, my experience with elected officials, legislators, whether they were in Oregon or now in California, are that those who don't really understand that we are community colleges, and that's a key term, and that also we constitute the communities in which we exist. Some of them see us as nothing more than job training factories in the most, maybe that's a little cynical, but I do worry about that. So, I wrote a piece. Some of you might or might not be familiar with what's called the Heterodox Academy. Heterodox Academy, somewhat controversial. It was started by some university professors who felt as if viewpoint diversity was not occurring to the extent it should be. And so they've tried to honor the idea that at a university and higher education should be about inquiry, curiosity, and a true diversity of voices. And so, I'll let people decide whether or not they think they're succeeding in their mission. But I got contacted by them because I had written something, and they said, we don't have community colleges participating in our dialogues. Would you write something about community colleges as a place for civic engagement? And so I wanted to share some of what I shared about what I think as community colleges as being essential sites of viewpoint diversity, because I think we have at the community college level, because of the students that we have and the faculty really, and classified members. And I think we have some unique elements that create and constitute a type of diversity that's unique from, say, what you see at a Brown or a Yale or a Princeton, or really even a California State or a UC. So that's what I was hoping to talk about mainly today. But first, just a little bit about the League. So the League is the statewide membership association for all of the California Community College districts. That includes the controversial all-online college known as Calbright. So all 73 districts and 116 colleges in California are members of the league. Very importantly, we are distinct from the chancellor's office, right? The chancellor's office is the state agency. They are part of the government. We are an independent 501c3, and we are supported by, and we represent, and we advocate on behalf of, and we provide professional development and district services in support of the 73 districts and 116 colleges. We like to say that we support the practitioners, people such as yourselves who are actually working with students, implementing the good and bad laws passed here in Sacramento. We're obviously based in Sacramento because that's where the state capital is. And so we try to do our best to advocate for more money, more resources, and to support the mission of the colleges by either preventing bad legislation, which we're not always successful doing, and trying to support what we think is legislation that actually helps you fulfill your mission to your students and your communities. So that's what the league is. And I should say that our structure is kind of interesting. I report to 3 boards, which is pretty crazy. The league's been around for 31 years, and we've always had 100% membership of all the districts. So that's good, because when we go into the Capitol, the legislators and the governor's office, they know that we are speaking with the membership of all the districts. So that gives us credibility and a voice. And often we're aligned with the chancellor's office, but sometimes we aren't. Sometimes we have a distinct perspective on the budget and or on policy bills from the chancellor's office, and that's okay. So our board, we have 2 policy boards. We have a policy board made up of 21 trustees. It includes a student trustee who was elected statewide by her or his, I should say by their peers, the other student trustees that sit on boards, the local boards. And then we have a 15-member, what we call, for shorthand, it's not my favorite term, but we call it the CEO board, made up of chancellors, superintendent presidents, and presidents of the colleges, elected by their peers. And then the league board, just to make it more confusing, is our 3rd board. The league board is the operational board, which is constituted by the officers of both of the policy boards. So they are in charge of hiring and could fire whoever's in my seat. They do my performance evaluation. They go over the league budget with us and focus on the internal workings of the league, trying to make sure that the organization is working as best it can be. So that's how we're structured. And we have conferences, and if you've never been to one of our conferences, I would invite you. Our website is, the community college. You just look up Community College League. We have events all year, all over the state. Our next event is in beautiful Dana Point, California. It will be our annual trustee conference. Very much looking forward to getting back to a place where there's the coast. I grew up, even though I spent a lot of time in Oregon, I grew up in Los Angeles and moved to the Bay Area for higher ed. And then after my master's, got a job at Portland Community College. So that's how I came to Oregon, but I wanted to move back to California, which is always a smart economic move. Come back to California and then try to find a place to live. So I live in a yurt somewhere. No, anyway, Happy to be back, though. Happy to be back. Very challenging time. So I would like to talk a little bit about, I should probably be looking at the chat. All right. At any point in time, happy to, if you have observations, interjections, questions, would love to entertain those. But I would like to share a little bit, if I might, about my argument, which is that community colleges are really essential points of viewpoint diversity. And so, not to get too biographical, but I grew up in LA, and I did well in school until I got to high school. And then I was more interested in having fun and playing sports and didn't pay attention. Fortunately, someone said, hey, you should go to a community college. And I wasn't mature and smart enough to just live at home and save money. I wanted to get out of my house, not because my parents were bad or anything like that, but I was stubborn. I wanted to leave, and moved to Santa Barbara and went to Santa Barbara City College right before there was any tuition. So I remember the first term checking out at the register, and I had to pay $15 in fees. And I had, I think, 6 classes. I mean, it was just remarkable. And if you've ever been to Santa Barbara City College, it's gorgeous. And I had a transformational experience there. I got back into learning. I had professors who stimulated regions of my brain that had gone dormant, and it changed my life. That year at Santa Barbara City College, it's arguably the most important year of education, of higher education that I've had. And that's why I do what I do. Because I believe in, because I experienced the transformational capacity of community colleges, and that I was able to transfer to UC Santa Barbara and then Berkeley and then to go on. So it was that year at Santa Barbara City College. So that's why I'm so honored to be in this position where our job is to help all the colleges. So my argument, though, is that we have some unique elements at community colleges which are great for civic engagement and dialogue in a time where we are so balkanized, we are so bifurcated, we are so separated. Everyone is atomized, balkanized, angry at each other in so many ways. And then the pandemic has exacerbated that, and technology has arguably made it even more of a challenge to get people together and to have respectful communication and to agree to disagree in a way that's important. I should say that for 10 years, I directed the speech and debate program at Portland Community College, and that was another place that, or another activity where I saw students engaged in speech and debate. And while it teaches some habits that I do not think are constructive, right? You're always trying to win an argument. At the same time, you learn the difference between a logical fallacy and putting together a case. And the best debaters are the people who listen carefully, which is, I don't want to say counterintuitive, because most people think, oh yeah, the best debaters are the ones who speak the most eloquently. Well, it's really the ones that listen the most carefully and critically and effectively, that understand the issues, who do the best. But the whole idea is that you communicate, you make arguments, and then based on that, even if you disagree yourself, you can say, this was a very well put together set of arguments. And what a great skill. So any of you that have ever done or are involved in speech and debate, again, there are some negative elements to it, but I think it's really important, and it certainly helped me, I think, really better understand just the notion of discourse and that people can disagree. So the arguments I made in my article are that we have some unique aspects of community college diversity. Everyone here is familiar with how diverse our student body is in terms of race and ethnicity, right? We're the most diverse institutions of higher education, right? There might be some universities that have large numbers of international students, and so they might compete, but just in terms of racial and ethnic diversity, and for many of our colleges, even international students, English as a non-native language students, first generation, we are unique. But one, I think, of the most important elements of community college diversity is our intergenerational diversity. So I remember my first term at Santa Barbara City College. I don't remember the class. I can't remember if it was history or it was political science or what it was, but I remember sitting on the grass because it was beautiful, as it often is in Santa Barbara, and sitting on one side of me was a gentleman who was probably in his mid-40s, who was a Vietnam veteran. Sitting on the other side of me was a fresh out of high school 18-year-old woman. And then sitting across was a young man, probably mid-20s. I think I was 18. And that the fact that we had a gentleman who was a Vietnam veteran, I mean, that completely changed our conversation and our discussion. And I think one of the great things about community colleges is there are few places in the United States where you have intergenerational discussion and perspective sharing. I mean, think about it. Where does that happen? Well, somebody might say, well, it happens in some religious locations, but how diverse is that group likely to be? Where at a community college, right, you get somebody who just lost their job, somebody who's gotten a divorce, somebody who's a single mom, somebody who's, right, military or military connected. So I think because of that intergenerational element of the community college population, that enhances civic engagement and participation and just perspective taking. I think you don't get that at Harvard. You really don't, right? You're not going to sit next to people who are 40, 50, 32, and 16. It just doesn't happen. So that one of my arguments is that we have great, pardon me, viewpoint diversity for that intergenerational component of our students. Second, I just mentioned it, is we have more military connected students at community colleges. Let's see, I know I had some data in the paper. So whether it's active military duty or military connected, someone in the family, spouse or child of someone, or somebody who's in the National Guard, student veterans. So community colleges have a much larger percentage of military connected students than do other institutions of higher education, save for West Point or Army and Navy, where it's a lot more heterogeneous. I'm homogeneous, I should say, pardon me. So we are far more likely to have somebody in class. So think about what that does for a discussion. If you have a 25-year-old Iraq War veteran, or somebody who's been on 3 tours, Iraq, Afghanistan, or somebody who's in the National Guard, or someone whose spouse is in the military, especially people who've served overseas, they're likely to have a different perspective than, let's say, a typical community college student who's not served in the military. And I think they bring to the classroom and to discussions, a perspective that you might not encounter if you were at many public universities or certainly some of the research one or private liberal arts colleges. That doesn't mean you don't, but you're much more likely, I think, to have a military connected individual or individuals in your classes. And I think that makes for a richer discussion often, and a type of ideological diversity that you're not likely to see in other institutions of higher education. And I think that's fantastic. I think it really is. And then the third area is typically, what we focus on, which is racial and ethnic diversity at community colleges tend to be more robust than they are at other institutions of higher education. So, the data, right? Latino and Latina students are, 28% of the 4-credit community college students nationally, much higher in California. Black and African-American students are about 13% of the community college population nationally, and API students about 6% of the total. Post-traditional students are about 20% of the students, right? Post-traditional, sometimes we call them returning students, older. You have 8% of the students who have bachelor's degrees. And so perhaps more important, of all the US undergraduate students from national data, about 43% of Black, 53% of Latino and Latina, 38% of API, and 56% of Native American undergraduates are educated at a community college. So, extraordinary diversity. I think this represents the trend of the United States. And so, again, you're going to get a different perspective from racial and ethnic and other minoritized communities that you might not get at certain institutions. Now, I think the counter argument to that is, yeah, well, community college students, number one, tend to have there tends to be less geographical diversity. You think about it, right? We have more, right? Because we serve the community. We also tend to have less socioeconomic diversity. Sure, we have some wealthy families who send their kids to the community college, but it's probably less likely. But I think because we have, and I'm going to stop after I say this, because of the fact that we have more military connected students and families, we have intergenerational diversity, as I've talked about, and then just more racial and ethnic diversity, that for civic engagement, civic participation, actually communicating with and hearing and listening to divergent opinions, it's much more likely to happen in a community college class if the faculty member or whomever are able to facilitate those kinds of discussion and take advantage of that unique diversity that we have at our community colleges. So I would end by saying, I think we as community colleges play an enormously important role for civic learning, democratic engagement, and the diversity of viewpoints. We have to do a better job and inviting the community in and facilitating such communication. But I think those just demographic factors place us in a unique position in our communities, because I don't know many places that have this kind of diversity. And I'll stop there. Jan.
So Jan, I don't know, do we want to, I think we're about at time. I
think
know, and
I run out. We've run
yeah,
out of things to say.
and I just want to say thank you for everybody, or to everyone for being here today. Jan's going to just mention the evaluation that we would encourage you to participate in just a second. But as I mentioned, today is our last presentation for the spring semester. We'll be starting up again in fall. And we are planning to have 6, possibly 7 speakers. And so this will be another way to continue our dialogue series. And we look forward to having all of you participate again. And we'll be doing this through 3CSN. And so hopefully the process will be the same sort of thing that we've been doing. So Jan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So I understand, and Rebecca will correct me if I'm wrong, that everybody who has come to one of our sessions this spring will receive an email with a survey link, and that link will give us feedback that we desperately need to make sure that what we're doing is valuable. It's good use of our time, your time, so that we can plan accordingly and make sure that we are doing a service